kids don't really, because they don't have that same process mastered yet. A lot of times they unintentionally get that message like there's something wrong with me. I'm doing something wrong. Um, I am not as good as the other person because they're able to do it and I'm not. So those are all just basically unspoken messages. Or sometimes people get frustrated and they will say things to their kids like, "Why can't you be like so and so?" Or "How many times do I have to tell you?" Or "When are you ever going to learn?" Yeah, and so think about the very core message that comes from that. It's like, one, I'm not good enough, and two, I'm not very smart because I'm not learning the way I'm supposed to. And then those become self-fulfilling prophecies for kids, right? They start believing that, and so then that's what they kind of live up to.
Hi, friends, and welcome back to Notes to My Nervous System. I'm Erin. Today's episode is brought to you by the Mind Circuit app. Mind Circuit uses evidence based neuroscience techniques to help you quickly reduce stress wherever you are. You can download it from your app store today. I'd like to welcome TJ Amos to the show today. TJ's decades long experience with transitions, helping children and family navigate change. She has been holding space for families and children in transitions since 1979, and her wisdom is as deep as it can get. If I could talk. Hi, thank you for coming today. I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. It's so important that we make sure that we are talking about mental health with little ones and families and how it's all interconnected. Um, and so I thought it'd be important to just jump right in and talk about, the ripple effect that these transitions have on a child, their environment, family members, their nervous system comes out in behavior. So, what are some of these difficult transitions that you've seen working with families, and what are some ways we can move through them and validate them?
So, I over the years, I've seen things shift. Obviously, there's things now that kids face that they didn't used to face in the past,
True.
or not as intensely, at least. I think it's a kind of a misnomer to say that kids didn't deal with difficult things early on. There's always been difficulties in society. Um,
True.
kind of my earliest experiences, which made me aware of some of these changes, is the fact that I grew up in a military family. And so there was a lot of transitions, moving every 2 to 4 years in and out of the country, changing schools frequently, having difficulty making friends because of frequent changes, and so forth. And so it really sensitized me to a lot of the things that kids deal with that adults take for granted, right? So adults have, even though there are times that we, of course, we see people in therapy who have difficulty regulating emotions or dealing with transitions and stuff, but overall, adults have the capacity, um, like intellectually and emotionally, for the most part, to handle transitions and to process them and understand them and try to work through them, etc. Kids don't have that same capacity mentally because they're not as developed psychologically or cognitively, especially early on. Kids still have a fantasy kind of approach to life. So
Mhm.
they think if they pretend something is going to happen. And so things like divorce, which has been going on for ages, obviously, but things like divorce can be difficult because they are either imagining that if they fix something or do something different, it'll be fixed, or if they want their family to be together again, they'll come back together. So they don't really process that same information the way the adults are in the
It
moment.
sounds like they're taking more ownership of it than they should or need to.
Oh, absolutely. So, yes. And so those kinds of transitions are really big for kids, especially when it comes to the time where separation has occurred and there's two different households. So, currently, I work with several kids who go between two households, and they'll go one week one place, one week another place. And And as they get older, I have one that's been doing that for a couple years and now is a teenager and has told the parents, like, I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to live in one house. And so those kinds of things come up, and those are the things that are important for kids to process. There's transitions that we again take for granted, like a start of a new school year or changing schools because they've graduated to a different level of education. There's moving to new houses. What does that look like for the kids? They're going to have a different room. They may or may not find a toy that they wanted to bring with them that got lost in the process that they treasured. Just those kinds of things can come up and feel complicated to kids because they don't understand the whole thing.
So, how do we help kiddos in these situations process or even recognize that they need time to process these big transitions?
So the best way to do that, up to a certain age, like I do this with kids up until about 12 years old. 12 years old, they tend to start being able to be more verbally having full conversations. I mean, younger ages can do that too. It's not that they can't talk, but they have other ways of expressing themselves. And
It's
so
not that robust, complex language and critical thinking.
exactly, and so 11 up to about 11 years old, play is still really important to kids. I don't know if you can see my hat, Mr.
You
Rogers is like
can.
yeah, I
Yeah.
carry around on my hat, and so every time somebody comes into my office, I just tell people I'm a big fan of Mr. Rogers, and I just wanted to share, a quote that actually Marie Montessori said as well, but Fred
I
Rogers.
love Montessori's approach.
Yeah. So Fred Rogers was basically Maria Montessori said, "Play is the work of the child." Um, Fred Rogers basically learned a lot from Marie Montessori and reinforced that, and basically through his program helped try to encourage families to allow children to express themselves, and a lot of times just really explaining things to kids in very tangible ways. And so they don't understand how things work. And so maybe if it's a moving process, moving to a new house, saying, "Do you want to see the moving truck? Look, this is how the van picks it up and down. This is what's going to happen to your things when it gets moved. Do you have everything packed up? Look, this is how a box works." Very simple things that we think make sense to us,
Yeah.
but it really helps a kid understand, like, oh, okay, my things can be safe if they're wrapped up and put in a box and then put on that truck. Right, and so then you'll see, like, opportunities then the parent has if they have those kinds of things, like, some kids have toy trucks or cars or whatever, and so they can
So
play
they
with
have more of a concept.
mhm, so they can actually play it out with the kids and say, "Oh, let's build the house over here," and they can build, blocks or Legos or things like that. They can pretend they're moving from one house to another, and for us, it seems like it's just play,
Mhm.
but for kids, they're really conceptualizing things, and so,
It's helping them to prep for the next thing in their life and make it not so unknown.
yeah, it's developing social and emotional skills, it's helping with creativity and imagination, brain development. There's, just a lot of things that play does for kids to kinda help them process changes and regulate the emotions that go with that.
Now, you mentioned Montessori, and I don't know if everybody knows what Montessori is. So, would you mind taking a moment to explain a little bit about the Montessori approach? Where it
Sure.
came from?
Marie Montessori started a school basically with the concept that kids in regular schools were not necessarily getting full opportunities to learn because they're expected to follow a kind of a rigid model.
Mhm.
And that model doesn't fit every child. Yes, we can make kids do things, but then you also see behavioral issues in school when you get kids who have different learning styles. And so for some schools, they feel like it's too chaotic, and that kids get labeled with different things that may or may not be accurate because they don't fit into that mold. So the way her school was designed was to have the learning be basically child led. I mean, there was a basic curriculum that they needed to learn before they graduated and so forth, but the school is for young children, and so it was based on the children being able to play. And so they would have the room full of things that kids would play with that you might see at any school, but it was more child-led, so they would be able to see what the kids are trying to learn and not learn.
Oh,
So
so they have more choice, even
they
at a
had
young age.
yeah, they had more choice. They weren't kind of forced to sit in the chairs and just kind of be looking straight forward, not interact with
Mhm.
each other except during recess and that kind of stuff.
I was always told as a little one to stop fidgeting. I had the worst time sitting still. Still
Mhm.
do.
Yeah. I remember being in church and I would be kicking my leg just because I needed to move, and I remember my father actually getting upset because it didn't look right in church, you know?
Mhm.
It's the we
Mhm.
expect a lot of kids to do things that they're just, a lot of times not equipped for. I mean, yes, you do learn to mold yourself into expectations, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're processing or learning from those expectations that they're meeting up to.
Well, these transitions and these expectations we're putting on little ones, what does it do to their nervous system, or what message are they getting that the adults are not necessarily aware of, or maybe we don't want to give them that message, but we don't realize.
Yeah, so basically if you think about like our nervous system, like if I feel kind of antsy right now, I have the option of getting up and moving around the chair if I want to.
Nobody's going to yell at you to sit down.
No one exactly. And so I can respond to that need if I choose to. And I can also, because I have an adult cognitive level of skill, I can say, yeah, no, I need to wait and do that in a little bit. I'll take the dogs outside or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Kids don't really because they don't have that same process mastered yet, a lot of times they unintentionally get that message like there's something wrong with me. I'm doing something wrong. Um, I am not as good as the other person because they're able to do it and I'm not. So those are all just basically unspoken messages. Or sometimes people get frustrated and they will say things to their kids like, "Why can't you be like so and so?" Or how many times do I have to tell you? Or when are you ever going to learn? Those kinds of things. And those,
I remember those phrases.
yeah. And so think about the very core message that comes from that. It's like, one, I'm not good enough. And two, I'm not very smart because I'm not learning the way I'm supposed to. And then those become self-fulfilling prophecies for kids, right? They start believing that. And so then that's what they kind of live up to.
That becomes their narrative.
Yeah, and then their bodies become dysregulated because they're already feeling badly about themselves. If they have feelings that come up that they've been told are like, why can't you be like so and so and just sit still or stop that or
Mhm.
basic things that because people get frustrated, then it's like their bodies don't know what to do then. And so either it gets accentuated because they just can't stop it anymore. It's like having an itch after a mosquito bite, right? You're sitting there telling yourself, I shouldn't scratch myself because it's just going to make it worse. But
Mhm.
then as soon as you start thinking about it, it starts
Now
itching.
it's, yeah, it's way itchier.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that a parent can remind themselves, a trick, a tool, something to help us remember that maybe these expectations aren't age appropriate, or remind us that some of the messaging might not be what we want to give to our kids? I'm sure no parent or caregiver out there or guardian wants to leave their little one with the idea of not enough.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we do this accidentally sometimes. We don't always recognize what we're doing. So,
Yeah.
this
And
isn't
yeah,
vilifying the parent or caretaker. It's
right.
more of what's occurring, what's happening in the nervous system. How can we help?
Yeah. So I see several kids in my practice right now that are dealing with kind of high conflict divorces that have taken place. So just using that for an example, right? I mean, the parents are mad at each other possibly. In the best case scenario, they have an amicable divorce. They get along, they co-parent well, and things like that. That obviously that happens with some people. For other people, it is a high conflict situation. People are blaming each other. They're still angry, whether it's fresh or it's just unresolved issues that are just still hanging out in the air with them. They're not regulating their emotions. And so they don't want to like put that on the kids, but kids pick up our emotions. Like it's almost like when you're coming home tired and you're just kind of sitting there and a kid might come up to you and say, "Well, what's wrong?" And
Yeah.
maybe you're just tired, right? But they have that sensitivity because they're still tuned into things around them. We've learned to shut things out. Kids are still absorbing everything. That's why they say that kids learn by our example and not just our words, right?
Hmm.
So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Unfortunately, sometimes.
yeah, unfortunately sometimes. But so I think one of the things just to be aware of is like in that example, it would be like if you have a conflict that you're dealing with, don't have it in front of your kids. You can always say something like, we didn't get along or we had a hard time staying together. We still love you, but this is for between us and it's not you. To make it real clear that it's not the child's responsibility, right? And then it
It's
becomes
nothing that they've done or they can fix.
yeah, and that's I think people are aware of that, but I think it can be unintentional. Like if you're on the phone and saying, "Well, when are you going to pick them up?" Well, I can't do that. Well, that doesn't work for me. Or it can be just a tone of voice, right? And so it really puts the weight on the parents to say, "Yeah, I need to take that deep breath, like what you're talking about at the very beginning, right? Taking that deep breath and go and just having a maybe a spatial awareness, like, is my kid around me?
Oh, okay.
Am I in a room where I can talk quietly and privately so that the little ears aren't listening? You know? And along with that, it's not like you need to keep secrets though. So, I'm gonna look at my notes for a minute because I
Sure.
put some things down. So, like what the parents can do is help kids through their play
Hmm.
that is giving them permission to express themselves, right? So kids that have dolls or clay or drawing stuff or whatever it is, whatever medium they choose or feel comfortable using. Some kids use Legos, some use building blocks, different things, right? So it can be really different. One thing I thought was really fun was I have a Jenga set, which I've written some words on there, and so for like when kids come in, it'll say favorite movie or favorite book or hard work at school. And so when they pull out the Jenga block, they respond to that block, what's written on it.
Oh,
And
I
you
love that. I had one of those in college, but it had different.
oh, okay. Yeah, and this was just something that you can buy Jenga so parents can buy a Jenga set at any store. You can buy a knockoff, they're cheaper. And then just get
You
a
can go to Goodwill. I'm sure they have plenty.
yeah, and get a marker, you can put it on yourself, you don't there I don't know of any specifically if they are, they're probably expensive if they're pre-printed with something for kids, but you can just put your and you can personalize it for yourself and your kids, right? Whatever your situation is that you wanna help them talk about. And what you're
I
doing
love
is
that.
uplifting, you're basically telling them without telling them, it's like, "It's okay to talk about these things."
Mhm.
Let's play a game. You know what? Oh, and by the way, when you see the words on here, if you can't read it, I'll help you read it. And then if you can read it, just like respond, just respond to it however you want. There's no right or wrong answer, but it's just like, let's see if we can have fun with this, right? Because the thing that parents will sometimes try to do is they'll say, let's sit down and talk, right? I remember my parents used to lecture
That
me.
gets your nervous system like on alert, like danger.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness, what's going to happen?
yeah. And do you remember getting lectured, right? When you did something wrong?
Hmm.
Right? Well, instead of doing that, because kids overall don't do well, and I'm gonna be gender specific. Boys are even have a more difficult time than girls do, sitting still, looking eye to eye, having a conversation. So boys, for example, I've taken kids outside and played basketball with them,
Oh,
and then
that's
talked
smart.
about we're playing basketball. Or that's the with play therapy. You're sitting there, you're playing with them and talking, just chit chatting or commenting on what they're doing, and then they start talking because they're more comfortable.
My
So
mother would lock us in the minivan and have us sit next to her while we were driving and have those conversations.
yeah,
But
but
it
how
worked because we didn't have to see each other eye to eye, and there were other things to concentrate
there are times to have those kinds of conversations. I imagine there are some kids that would just tune her out though if she did that with them.
on. Yeah, no, we did not dare tune out.
Right. And it depends on the family, what kind of dynamics are going on, but there can be simple things you can do besides play. So if you want to have a like an in-depth conversation that feels important, like sometimes it's a loss of a pet or someone in the family has died, things like that. And so I know sometimes kids like just like we are as human beings, we have animal kind of part of our nature, right? We have that innate desire to protect ourselves in some way. And if you think about I think about my dogs a lot of times, it sounds kind of disrespectful, but really they kind of remind me of kids sometimes because they're tuned into your emotions, the way they respond, and we do something very similar that dogs do. Dogs are denning animals, right? So when they want to feel safe, and it's thundering outside, for example, you can sometimes put them in a crate or put them in a on the dog bed, cover them with a blanket, that kind
My
of stuff.
golden retriever likes to jump in the bathtub.
Yeah. So kids, and along that lines, kids sometimes, like if you think about when do they tend to talk? Well, during the day, they want to play outside with their friends where their energy level is kind of high. So it's going to be hard to kind of like just get a moment like, okay, calm down. Let's talk for a minute. Got something important to talk about. Right. So, and all of this also depends on the child, right? So some kids this may not work with because you don't want
Right.
them going to bed feeling afraid or sad, that kind of stuff. But if you can go to their room, even in the daytime, if you have a way to darken the room a little bit, if they feel comfortable in the bed, maybe cuddling up with a blanket, just like sitting next to them. And sometimes kids, when they have something big to share, I don't know if you've seen kids do this, but they'll put the blanket over their head.
Yes, I have noticed that.
Yeah, and they want to talk from under the blanket.
Hmm.
So those kinds of things where parents can go like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's what my kid needs to do. I don't need them to look me eye to eye. So if I have something big to talk about, I wonder if they'll respond to that way of talking too."
Oh,
Right.
I like that. So being aware of what they naturally do to have those difficult conversations or share their feelings, and then just letting them.
Hmm. Yeah,
Thank you.
a lot of those things are just letting the child take the lead, right? Because so many times as adults and parents, we want to take the lead because we want our kids to listen to us, follow the rules, do chores. There's so many expectations we place on kids. And I think something just for parents to be reminded of is that, and so when people come to my office, this is what I tell kids. I only have two rules. One is that they don't break anything because if they break something, then no one else can play with it. And two, that they don't do anything to hurt themselves or to hurt me
Mhm.
because it's a safe space. I said, you can do anything else. And I tell parents the same thing with them in the room. And I say, school expects a lot of you, parents expect a lot of you. Society in general, the world around us expects a lot of you. So here is a place where
Absolutely.
I don't have that expectation for you. And so if parents can give kids that moment to not place a lot of expectations on them, then that can free kids up sometimes to express themselves when they're feeling really like you're talking about in the body. They get really constricted in their body, and you can kind of see kids sometimes just physically just relax.
Wonderful insight. Thank you, TJ. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to enlighten us with that and give us parents and caregivers and guardians.
Well, so I don't have the website specifically, but they can Google Psychology Today. Just put in my name and it will pull up my profile and it'll talk about who I am, how I work, who I work with. And I'm always glad to talk with people if they have questions or they need ideas or need referrals that I can't meet the need for.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, TJ, for
You're
your time today.
welcome. Thank you.
Such a great reminder that change hits our nervous system hard, but we can steady ourselves with small anchors. If this helped you breathe a little easier today, please hit follow, leave a quick review, or share it with a friend.